Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Biraj Patel. I'm the founder and CEO of PreferredMD. I'm also a practicing anesthesiologist. And I want to welcome you all on to this webinar today about retaining employees in this competitive market. So first and foremost, I want you to meet our host for today's webinar, Ashley Poulos.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley, as he said. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to talk about everything that's going on in the healthcare market right now. Sorry about that. I am an administrator for Midtown Surgery Center, which is based in Manhattan. I've been working with Dr. Patel for a little over 12 years now. And we've had many discussions regarding the healthcare market and what's going on. So it's great to be able to broaden our horizon and speak to other individuals regarding this. So during the conversation or during our discussion, if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to put it in the chat and we'll go through and we'll try to answer as much as possible. But why don't we go ahead and get started?
Great. Thank you, Ashley. So, I neglected to say that we're going to record this webinar and distribute it to all the participants so that they have a point of reference. Obviously, we'll hide any personal information, so you won't have to worry about that. So I think let's get started. Just as a brief overview, I wanted to give you a sense of what we'll cover. We'll cover the current employment market. We'll cover what the changes have occurred since COVID-19. We'll discuss generational behaviors and how the demographic of our employment of our employees has changed and what their expectations are. We'll look at ways we can improve retention, both traditional and through automation. We'll discuss a little bit of automation in a little bit more depth and how it can benefit issues with retention. And finally, we'll finish up with the future of technology in healthcare, which is becoming more and more profound as an impact. So without further ado, let's get started.
Okay. Well, the first thing you mentioned was the current employee market. Could you just let us know a little bit about what you've experienced over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the biggest impact on our market has been because of COVID-19. I think before 2019, we were pretty stable. And then all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, we were all forced to be in an environment or a situation that we weren't in before. So everyone had a chance to reevaluate their life and their work environment and to demand different conditions. 2021 was the year of the Great Resignation. 47 million workers quit, which was much higher than has ever happened before. In 2022, we had an average of 30% of people who either switched jobs or quit jobs, which is significant. And 10% of that was in the healthcare field. Of that 10%, 50% were non-clinical staff. So your administrators, anyone who participated around healthcare rather than through clinical medicine. So that's a huge portion.
Do you think with the factors that you said, with the resignation, with the shifts, how much of an impact was that in healthcare? And do you find that it was certain individuals that impacted the healthcare or was part of this change?
It was significant. I think every sector in our economy has been impacted by this shift. I think it's important that we examine the different generations and how it pertains to an ASC, because there are differences, yes, certainly. So if we look at the breakdown of the employees that we have in an ambulatory setting, you have predominantly Gen Ys and Gen Zers. Gen Ys are the ones we recognize as millennials. They are in their 20s and 30s, and they are more like middle management. They are looking forward to having a well-established career, and they want to provide some kind of reinforcement for their nest egg. They're looking forward to their futures, young families. They really care about being in a career that has a positive impact. Communication is very important for this group. They connect more on social channels. They're very connected with platforms. TikTok and Instagram and so forth. But I think more so is the next generation, Gen Zers. They are, your front desk staff, your schedulers. They're in their 20s. We call them Zoomers, and they are very connected to technology. They interact socially through technology and are very well informed. So it's this group of individuals I think we need to really focus on when we're talking about retention, because this is the fastest growing sector of our society. This will be by far the largest group of employees in the next 5 to 10 years. So we need to focus on their needs and what they see in their working environment.
Okay. Seems like there's a bunch of different groups that affected essentially what has happened over the last few years. Do you think that one area plays a significant role over the other ones, or is it just, the two, like the Zoomers that you mentioned?
No, I think we need to look at general issues that happen across generations, and then focus more on the younger folk, the people that are in our centers. They make up the huge majority of our employees, the Gen Ys and the Gen Zers. Okay.
So you think that they played a significant role in the shift that we've had, or the great resignation that we've had?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we need to focus our retention methods on, in general terms, across all generations, as well as more specific ones with the younger folk.
Well, being that they're so different, what would be different ways to help retain them?
Okay, so, we've done pretty well as an industry. I think the ambulatory surgery center industry has done pretty well with compensation packages and benefits. I think we appreciate across the board that everyone's well informed, being more invested in their positions, maybe motivated with stock options, or having some kind of incentive that is more driven around the success of the business is very beneficial. We can also look at other benefits that are presented to our employees, 401ks, retirement packages. As we talked about with the Gen X's, Gen Ys, they're very focused on what they're going to have to retire with. So, 401k packages are important. I think we have to get more granular with things like that, because of the
sorry to interrupt, but that kind of seems like the straightforward package of what typically we're used to offering.
Sure.
In surgery centers or in establishments. I think it seems like we have to be more creative, because
definitely
outside the box. I actually wanted to find out from everyone else that's in our discussion here, who has other methods as far as how we retain staff outside of the set benefit package that can be offered. If anyone else has other ideas that they've come up with, we'd appreciate to hear it.
Yeah.
So keeping staff fit mentally, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see such great ideas. Yes, so that's very important. To foster a positive work environment, it seems like that's really the direction that a lot of these comments are going in, and that's completely true. It's very, very important that employees feel connected to where they work. They feel appreciated, recognized, and we can do a lot for that. Staff recognition, I see a lot of facilities I work with will make it an employee of the month, or will sponsor lunches or a happy hour to allow everyone to connect and to humanize the whole experience. I think that's incredibly important.
Are there any other ideas that could be utilized besides just, in addition to that? Or what are other areas that, with the different generations, that they would be looking for?
I would, between generations, I think fostering connection, having mentorship, programs where different members of the team can connect with one another, especially the senior ones can connect with the more junior ones, to know that you have someone to go to. Interaction, I think, is very, very important. Teamwork, collaboration, all of that is something that employees look forward to. No one wants to feel they're by themselves and they're responsible for everything, and everything's on their shoulders. A big part of this, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
A big part of it is actually also the quality of the work. I think that is very, very important. If we look at what type of work everyone is doing and how we can set them up for success.
What do you mean by that, though, as far as the quality of work?
By setting them up for success or the quality of the work, we want to set them up in a situation where failure is not really something that happens very easily. We want to give them all the opportunities to do well. We want to make all their tasks easier, more streamlined, more approachable, so that people are doing the work that they actually like to do. So they're committed to doing it.
Okay. I think it kind of sounds like it ties back into what the different generations are looking for as far as their job and their career, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people want to feel more invested, and they want to really make a difference. And that's really part of making people satisfied with what they do. Okay.
So, I mean, you mentioned like teamwork, communication, collaboration, like those are kind of key words to
absolutely
producing like an inclusive environment. Right. What outside of, because a lot of times we go into work and we have our tasks A, B, and C that we have to do, and it takes away from, everything else that is, I think, more important. Yes. So are there ways to resolve that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just stripping back what the most mundane, repetitive tasks are and finding ways that we can improve that process, I think it's very, very helpful to do that.
And what are some ways?
Well, let's, if we may, let's move on to automation. I think that is one of the keys to this.
Could we ask everyone else then? So, because I think we know, but how do you define automation as it is for the purposes of like staff retention, or kind of what we've been just discussing as far as appealing to all the different demographics so that they're engaged with work? Like, what does that entail?
Any ideas about automation? Yes, exactly. So automation is any process or technology by which we're decreasing human intervention, thereby reducing a cost or a mistake from being made. And I think it's important to stress here that automation is a way we can recenter people's attention to the jobs that they are actually hired to do. So automation plays a really large part in helping retain employees because it really does set them up for success.
Do you think anyone or employees would have any sort of fear that it takes away from their role or like any sort of job security?
Absolutely not. I think one of the things automation does, it allows people to focus, like I said, on what it is that they were hired to do. If, for example, I'll take a role. It's a surgical scheduler and in an ambulatory surgery center. Their job is to coordinate and to kind of make things fit together so that before the day of surgery, all the pieces come together. A lot of time and effort and burnout comes from having to search for information. That is not really what a scheduler is imagining their job to be, and that is what's resulting in the burnout. So automation simply takes away the mechanism of how the information gets there and allows the user or the staff member to focus on what it is that they do.
Okay. Do you think it ties back then to just improving job satisfaction or performance? Like, how does that directly relate to the patient's the employees' engagement with work?
It absolutely leads back to job satisfaction because now they're focused on exactly what it is they're hired to do. They work in a process where information is delivered to them, and without the inefficiencies of having to get that information or finding it in their emails, it really does work well to focus everybody so they can connect exactly to what it is they're after.
Okay, I mean, we're talking about automation, but how do we actually implement that? What is it that we would do?
A great example of automation at an ASC would be to use automation to obtain medical histories from patients, for example. When a case is booked, a questionnaire sent out to a patient, which is populated by them and presented to a clinical member of staff. So no time is wasted leaving voicemails or trying to obtain information from patients manually. It's all done on a user-friendly platform.
Okay. Do you have like any examples of where it's been utilized in healthcare so far?
Yes, absolutely. The Mayo Clinic uses a very similar system where it's called Symptom Checker, and they send out a questionnaire to a patient prior to a visit. So the day-to-day questions about their health, their history, their medications, allergies, etc., are discovered before any clinical interaction with a nurse or a physician. Thereby, the patients can present their answer, have their questions answered straight away by the nurse or the doctor, rather than go through a list of questions that could be answered online.
Okay. Do you find that it's mainly large institutes that are able to access these different automations, or is it becoming more of an option for the rest of us?
Yeah, there are options out there that are similar to the hospital systems. Private practices now have access to those, but they're more standalone pieces of software that automate one singular part of the patient care experience.
Okay, and it's just a matter of having the different platforms.
Yes.
And bringing them all together so that it's a fluid daily process.
That's the main issue. There's multiple platforms out there that really only cater to one or two aspects of that entire patient care journey.
Okay. We haven't talked about ChatGPT before. And I wanted to see if people in the audience have heard of that, because it was the first time I had heard about it when we discussed it. Does anyone know what ChatGPT is? I think that's another, it's a newer technology that's being utilized in healthcare, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. ChatGPT has become all the rage, especially recently, from the whole Google debacle. But yes, you're right. ChatGPT is an AI platform that takes billions of pieces of information and tries to create a response to a question in the form of a human response. And it's been pretty accurate, especially the open source version.
Have you used it?
I tried it last week, yes. So while I was researching for this webinar, we actually looked into what ChatGPT would think of streamlining or making certain roles in an ambulatory surgery center more efficient, such as front desk or surgical coordinator or benefits clerk. And the results were telling. So the first suggestion was to have a self-check-in for a patient. The second was the vertical integration of data to streamline the process to make it more efficient.
What is vertical? What is that, vertical integration?
So the way I would interpret that is when you take information along the healthcare journey, something that the patient, say, responds to, and that information is transmitted from patient to physician to facility without having any redundancy. So there's full transparency for every user role. As you can see on the slide, there's up to 10 different user types or roles that are involved in the surgical booking process. All of these users have different, I'm sorry about the noise. This is New York City for you.
No, we can't hear the noise. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it takes these 10 different user roles. Everyone's inputting data in a different way. There's 70 pieces of information that go into scheduling a surgery. And that is what is connected vertically so that every user is aware of all the pieces of information that are presented or connected to this booking.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking at some of the questions that we had. Someone mentioned that Google is testing a similar chatbot. Did you know anything about that?
Yes, Google did. It's called Bard.
Okay.
Yes, and unfortunately, the test results weren't as promising as they wanted them to be. Okay. So yes.
Gotcha. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked because I was looking at we have some really good comments here. So with the vertical, so you explained the vertical integration, and it kind of goes back to the automation. Like what would be some of the main benefits of having automation in our system? Personally, I know that at our surgery center, everyone wears 12 different hats. And it's a struggle when our scheduler, for instance, goes on vacation and the rest of us have to scramble to kind of pick up the pieces plus do our own workload. And it's problematic. And it sounds like this system would kind of resolve some of those issues.
Yeah, you can imagine if it's like a Christmas tree. Everyone hangs pieces of information in that process, but there's a way that you can look at all this information and integrate it and see what is missing, and you can see what other users would have entered. So there's complete transparency, there's accountability, there is connection. You want to be able to connect with your colleagues so that you can see what they did or what they need to do and work collaboratively. This is all about collaboration. This is all about doing what you can to ensure that whole patient care journey is seamless.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to reduce a lot of potential errors, like we call them near misses, but it would reduce that by quite a bit.
Absolutely, because you've automated so many things. You've collected information from the patient. You've created different algorithms. So if the BMI is calculated at greater than 35 or 40, whatever your threshold may be, that's communicated to someone else in the form of an alert. Without a person being involved in that process, a person having to check a chart. So you're reducing the amount of errors that can be made and leaving all human interaction to be much more clinical and basing decisions on people's actual job titles.
This might sound like a silly question, but being that it takes more from the patient for their interaction to, if they're presenting information of their H&P ahead of time or their medical history, with the different demographics that we have for patients, is it a concern or issue with the older generations as far as being able to incorporate these new?
It's a valid concern. You always have flashbacks to your grandma trying to use a computer, and and it's fraught with disaster. But that is really not the case in 2023. Now we have UI user experiences that are designed for people who've never had any experience to be walked through the whole process. That's why you have so much engagement of the older generations on platforms such as Facebook. They're well connected. They are on these platforms because the platforms are really well designed. They make it super easy. So we've seen all the implementation. I've seen the facilities with the newer platforms. You can see that there's great uptake.
Yeah, sorry, someone just said that COVID, their grandma became a pro in using this platform. So yes.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about quite a bit, and I think we went through it quickly. But I just want to know, based off of everything we've discussed, like automation, the way we've had shifts in how healthcare has gone over the last few years, and just with retaining employees and stuff, how does this transition into the future of healthcare? What should we expect?
We can expect more of the same. I think when you see the amount, the projected budgets for technology in hospital systems, there's an 80% increase over the next 5 years. It's tremendous. There's much more engagement now. Newer platforms are coming to the market, which are much simpler to use than in the past. And I see that the future is definitely in the direction of expanding the penetration of digital healthcare.
That will eventually intrigue younger generations to come back into healthcare, since we've had a shift of so many people leaving.
I think so. I think when you have an expansion of the Gen Zers over the next 5 to 10 years, as we do imagine, right now it's the smallest generation in our workforce, and that will expand to the biggest. So when you have that many people who are used to using platforms, who see the value in them, see the value in the connectivity, there will be a market drive to move healthcare in that direction. Furthermore, I think we need to look at cost. Right now, it may seem very cost prohibitive to have engagement on a lot of these platforms. But when you look at the overall strength and the overall net positive, with the decrease in cancellations, with the decrease in turnover of staff, there is a financial positive effective immediately when you subscribe to one of these things. So I do see a massive gain here.
Do you think that, so there will probably be savings. So once we have these technologies in place, it saves in, say, supply error as far as like purchasing or overtime, we streamline processes. Can we take that and then bring it back to re-engaging the staff? Like we're talking about lunches or,
Yes.
and that will be a way that we can offset some of the costs that would be, required to retain our staff.
Absolutely. Any savings can be moved back to growing the culture of the business. Just in terms of costs, in terms of turnover, if you think about it, it costs on average $5,000 to recruit a new member of staff at a surgery center, and it takes about 45 days. So the added stress when you have to redistribute that user's or that member of staff's work across the other employees, it's a snowball effect. So our goal is to increase work satisfaction. It is to bring connectivity between everybody. It is to engage our employees, and that would lead to a long-term positive retention flow.
Okay. It kind of bouncing back, like speaking about the automation, having all these different platforms. Do you think there's going to be a continued trend that the non-clinical staff has this option to work remotely, or we have to accommodate all these different schedules in that way?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, cybersecurity is always a real threat, a real issue. Mm-hmm. But now that we have secure platforms, you have transparency on these platforms. I see administrators like yourself are more and more comfortable with allowing their staff to work from home because they know exactly what is being done. It's very clear that it's not obscure or not hidden in someone's inbox or on phone calls, and they say that this is what they've done. This is all out in the open. So as these technologies develop further, you'll find that there's going to be more work from home situations, which in turn feeds back into what people want out of their work life. They want
that more.
Yes, they want, especially the Gen Zers, they are more focused on a work-life balance than any previous generation was.
Do you find that it's because they have other avenues to supplement what their primary role, like job, would be, and that's why it's not as much of a concern?
Yes, I think that they are not as maturely driven as previous generations, where it was important to, earn as much money as possible. The younger generations are really about engagement, quality of life, making a difference, feeling recognized, being recognized, and that is important for us to recognize as employers.
Okay. So sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but we mentioned before about, more experienced patients being able to handle the platforms. What about, like my generation, we're a little bit older. Like, are we going to be able to use all these different platforms easily and be able to pick up on them?
Certainly, I think just like the older generations, I think you're going to be just fine.
Experienced generations, yes.
Yes, I think they're very easy. So once you can see the information presented in a way that's simple to use and interpret, there's no doubt.
Okay. I mean,
and this will be the norm. This is going to be the norm with in time, because across every sector, we're seeing that in banking, we're seeing that in finance, we're seeing that across the board. Our homes are completely automated. There is home automation everywhere. We have Alexas, we have electronic timers so that we don't have to remember. We have thermostats that tell us that we're not in the room, so let's turn down the temperature. These are all mechanisms of automation.
So essentially, healthcare is going to catch up to the rest of
Catch up, exactly. Ashley, you're exactly right. Catch up being the operative word, because there is so much opportunity there to decrease the repetitive nature of what healthcare involves. I think once that's done, we can all focus back on looking after patients.
And the patient care, which is primary goal, essentially.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yes. Well, we went over a lot today, but I want to open it up to the audience. Like, do you guys have any questions? Is there anything you'd like us to discuss in more detail? Because we have some more time. Right. So automation will create a positive work environment. Someone put that. What is the best way to engage staff across the varying generational traits?
Yeah, I think we touched upon that with earlier in terms of the strategies we have for retention. It is definitely to give them a forum to connect on. May that be a social one, in the evenings, happy hours. We in the work environment where we can do it, one-to-one. We can have lunches. But we can also do it through technology with being able to connect through chats and, collaborate with one another while we work together.
Nice. And then what techniques besides automation worked for us to improve retention?
So I think as we looked at, a great benefits package is one of those. It's to foster that positive work environment that we all strive for. We want to look forward to seeing our colleagues, to be challenged. I don't think we discussed this too much, but it is to have a varied work experience. So if you're doing the same task over and over again, you're more likely to burn out, and you're less interested or less committed to doing what you do. If you have a more dynamic role where you're doing different aspects of your job, I think it really helps you to connect better with your work environment.
Be directly involved with different platforms within it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think AI will positively or negatively impact healthcare?
Great question. I do think that, look, we went through this when, 20, 30 years ago when the internet first began, where people were coming in with their printouts of, hey, I think I have this. We're still going to have an element of that, but I think the initial interest in AI told me this is going to be short-lived. I think ultimately when it comes to healthcare, most people understand that you need to see a doctor, and it won't. I don't think it'll impact healthcare too much.
Okay. One question is recommendations for low-cost tools for recruitment, which we talked about this a little bit before, as far as reaching out to the staff to,
That's right. The cheapest form of recruitment is to use your own staff. Create an amazing, positive place to work in. Create a great environment, and that by itself will be promotion enough, because your members of staff will tell other people, nurses will tell their colleagues. The surgical techs will reach out to their colleagues in the hospital and say, this is a very different environment to work in. No one yells at me. I come to work and I have a really great coffee in the staff break room. All these things will contribute to spreading the word. And that's really the best, most efficient way of recruiting.
I think also by recruiting friends of staff, they're only going to recommend solid employees because they have to work with them. So it's a great way to make sure that you have quality employees that are coming on board.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What is one of the most common pain points or aggravations that you hear from administrators or clinical managers?
The biggest pain point? It is staffing. Whoever you speak to, and I've spoken to hundreds of administrators, it's always, how do I prevent the turnover of staff? I'm always short-staffed. I'm always stressed out. I can't get home to my kids. I'm doing other people's jobs. How can I make this more efficient? That's what it is.
Does it tie into automation then? Because not only we have to expect that we're going to have turnover, but how do we handle it when there is a turnover? Because there's going to be how long, like a downtime of say, 45 days or 50 days to get a new employee hired and up and running and trained. Like, so how do you, especially in a small setting, like handle that missing person from the team?
If you're not engaged on platforms that have vertical integration with transparency, then you're more likely to spend time taking on that role, learning what that person was doing or should be doing, spending time to log into their emails, try and work out where this information is. And that is the difficulty with turnover. We can see that turnover, unfortunately, is here to stay. But how do we mitigate the aftermath? How do we account for that? How do we make it more efficient to slide somebody else in that role? And it is just to have everything presented very well so that the new person taking over is very clear of what their role is and what the status of everything is when they step into those shoes.
Have a nice seamless transition into new
Exactly. It's almost like have a playbook.
Yeah, Steve asked, while talking about staffing, what resources can you use to find employees outside something that's not obvious? Like outside, we just talked about, having employees refer, but outside of that, are there other recommendations?
Well, you can always use a recruiter, but that can be quite costly. Yeah. But I would encourage anyone who has a shortage to go back to their system and look at it. So I'll give you, if we have time, I'll give you a little anecdote. So a facility, so go ahead.
We have time.
Okay, a facility I was working with said to me, "Oh, I'm a few nurses short, and I really can't recruit. I've been looking for 6 or 8 weeks and I can't find anybody. The market's terrible." So what we decided to do was to look at what the current nurses were doing, and we found that, for example, they had one nurse who spent 6 hours a day examining charts and calling patients. And for the night before, this is a ophthalmology center, the next day, there's 40 patients. So you have to take 40 histories if you can get hold of them and write down every medication that a 79-year-old cardiac patient has. This is a very inefficient way. So we implemented a system where information was collected online from the patient through a beautiful portal. And then beyond that, we created videos that were texted and emailed to the patients to describe the process the following morning for their admission. We also mentioned that there'll be a call this evening or that evening. And we found that the number of people who picked up was significantly higher than before. And secondly, the people who picked up actually genuinely had a question or a concern. So
as a follow-up from the video that they received.
As a follow-up from the video. So you can solve from just making a very small change. We took the amount of time that a nurse spent calling patients the day before from 6 hours down to 1. Mm-hmm. So we just reduced the amount of requirement of this busy work that needs to be done. Whereas the nurse now can focus on exactly what a nurse has hired to do, which is to look after patients and to speak to them about their medical conditions, as opposed to leave a message on a voicemail.
Okay, so it's kind of takes away from quantity, more quality of
quality. This is all about quality, so that our employees can spend more time engaging with one another, discussing patient care, being less stressed out, and hence helping with retention.
Okay, we have one more question. I think it's what is the most difficult role to fill? You think it's clinical or non-clinical at this point?
It depends who you ask. It depends who you ask. Nursing, I think, is up there, definitely. Surgical coordinators, that's a very skilled job. If you have to deal with collecting these pieces of information from offices, phone calls, faxes, emails. But I tell you what, there's ways out there that we can make it easier. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the way of the future. It is to look at how people have been doing their jobs and just make it easier for them so we can fill these positions more easily.
Okay, so part B to that is, what is the most difficult position to retain? Yes.
I think, again, I think the answer would be the same. Nurses get burnt out with the increased administrative burden that they have. Surgical coordinators get burnt out with, just accidentally missing that one piece of information. And it seems like the world's come to an end because all eyes are on them. They drop the ball, so to speak. So burnout is a big problem.
Drop the ball, but I have to say, surgical schedulers, they don't get the recognition they deserve. There are so many questions, like they're answering clinical questions, reaching out to so many offices that it's a high stress position.
Absolutely.
They need to have more credit for what they're doing.
Yeah. It certainly is.
So someone else said they recently had a lot of people with burnout. I think we're going to go through phases where, ebbs and flows on that.
And that feeds into retention. I think we need to look at the causes of the burnout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we answered and went over quite a bit today. So based on that, I think this is, concludes our webinar for this time. But we have talked about having more webinars in the future, correct?
Yes, we absolutely are. We would like to find great topics and other speakers who want to share their experiences. We're a collaborative group here. We just want to be able to help one another through our experiences, so we can build a better system for ourselves.
And we had some really good questions on here. So if anyone has additional questions or wants to reach out directly, please do. You are a great reference and have so much knowledge. So I think it would be beneficial. So if anyone has questions, they should reach out to you directly.
Yes, I would love that. And Ashley, thank you so much for hosting. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you. So when is the next webinar planned for?
A month or two. I think it will depend on what everyone wants. So we can work on something.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, and we'll send you a contact through your LinkedIn so that you have a reference for this webinar, and we look forward to connecting again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.